A day after it was announced that Derrick James was suing Errol Spence due to unpaid fees from a number of Spence's bouts, including his loss to Terence Crawford, allegedly, Errol Spence is now suing Derrick James in return, arguing that the pay was actually consistent. And I'm going to read out a few points from this Boxing Scene article, which I will link down below. Spence's lawsuit claims the Texas fighter, who was trained by James as an amateur before reaching the 2012 Summer Olympics in London, that Spence would pay James a bonus for some, but not all of the fights, to emphasize the value that Spence placed on their relationship. Spence and James's oral agreement does not provide that James would be paid 10% of Spence's total fight revenue, such that Spence is not required to pay James 10% of the revenue tied to a fight generated from pay-per-view or otherwise. Spence affirms that was an oral agreement in place, created when he turned pro in 2012, and paid James $250 of his $2,500 purse. Spence claims he consistently paid James 10% of his promoter-contestant contract earnings since. As Spence's fame increased, so did James's. As for the bonus, Spence gave one to James following his comeback win over Danny Garcia, but he did not deliver a bonus following the later unification victory over Cuba's Yordenis Ugas. James accepted these payments with no complaint, according to Spence's lawsuit. James reported in his lawsuit that Spence made $25 million to fight Terence Crawford, and produced a February text message in the evidence where Spence appears to concede he owed James another $2.15 million beyond the $350,000 he had previously paid him. In James's lawsuit, James claims Spence told the trainer that someone named Al had told him that $350,000 was generous. It was not revealed if Al was Spence's manager and Premier Boxing Champions founder Al Heyman. Spence's lawsuit claims that it wasn't until February, 6 months after the Crawford loss, that Spence first requested to be paid 10% of the total fight revenue. The Spence lawsuit contends James was given his proper 10% of the bout earnings cut of $2.5 million along with a $100,000 bonus. Thus, the Spence lawsuit claims the standard course of performance between Spence and James occurred for a 29th time. Spence is grateful for James's long-time assistance, but is disappointed by James's recent attempt overreach to try and obtain payment beyond their long-standing agreement and exceeding the scope of the services that James provided. Childers wrote in the lawsuit, James is seeking accounting for Spence's earnings in all of his pay-per-view bouts, including his lucrative triumphs over Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, and Ugas. Spence counters by seeking $250,000 or less from James along with attorney fees. Lots to unpack there. Errol Spence is clearly very upset that Derrick James has sued him. Personally, I've just got to ask the question, Errol Spence is set for life, so are his kids, so are their kids. They are going to be set for life. Does Errol Spence really need to sue Derrick James over what? A few lawyer fees? It just seems a bit petty to me. Now, I'm not the one who's getting sued, but I also don't have the pockets that Errol Spence has. So this counter lawsuit just seems a little bit, I don't know, a bit weird. But either way, this looks very ugly because these two were clearly very close. At least that's what it seemed. And to not have a signed agreement is very, very surprising. And quite frankly, I don't know why we keep seeing this at this professional level, because so many boxers and professional trainers, they seem to think that friendship is the way to go. Anybody who has any decent life experience will tell you business and friendship don't usually go well together. There are just so many examples of this. Carl Frampton was very close with the McGuigans. Barry McGuigan was his manager. Shane McGuigan, his son, was Carl Frampton's trainer. And those guys looked tight. They were really, really close. And then Carl Frampton, we start hearing from him, Barry McGuigan was allegedly withholding his money from a number of bouts, and they would go into the next bout with him not having been paid what he had earned. And the McGuigans would apparently say, nah, it's all good, just keep it under wraps, we're going to put this together, we're all friends, we're all family here. And then sure enough, Carl Frampton leaves the McGuigans and there's a lawsuit battle. We saw this with Gennady Golovkin and Abel Sanchez. Golovkin signs this huge deal with DAZN, and then we hear from Abel Sanchez that Golovkin wanted to cut his pay, allegedly. And then you had a situation which I was very familiar with because I followed his career from when he was British champion, Tyson Fury. He was promoted by Mick Hennessy, and he was very loyal to Mick. They were always talking to each other like they were family, that Tyson would never leave him, and etc., etc. Suddenly, Tyson Fury comes back to boxing. He signs some big money deals. In fact, one of the highest paid fighters in the sport. Then Mick Hennessy, whom we don't know why they split, them guys, as well as Tyson's uncle Peter Fury, but they end up in a lawsuit because Mick Hennessy is saying that he has not been paid what he is owed by Tyson Fury. Then Tyson Fury paid him a settled amount, and yeah, it was solved. But again, those guys, they appeared to be extremely tight. And this is not the first time Mick Hennessy has had a top fighter leave him. He also promoted Junior Witter when he was undefeated, challenging for a world title for the first time. He also promoted Carl Froch. And from what I've seen from Mick Hennessy, he says that Carl Froch was, again, like a family to him. They were eating at the same table, they were hanging out together, they stayed at each other's houses, and again, very, very close. But as soon as Carl Froch gets close to the Super 6 final, he leaves Mick Hennessy, signs with Eddie Hearn, and Mick is saying he was heartbroken by it, and that there was no signed agreement, it was just a contract, it was just verbal. And, you know, Carl Froch went and made the most money with a guy who could get him more opportunities, and worked out well for him, didn't work out well for Mick. And I've also talked about this in previous videos. There's my countryman David Tua. He was promoted and managed actually by Kevin Barry, who ended up training Joseph Parker. And I said before in that video, I do not believe Kevin Barry's word whatsoever. I do not trust that guy as far as I could throw him. He looks like he's one shady guy. And I always wondered why Joseph Parker ended up with that guy, because the story of him and David Tua seems like Kevin Barry took advantage of a very, very humble, rich man in David Tua, who earned everything. And apologies for the tangent, but I just don't know why we keep seeing this from professional fighters and boxers. It's just weird to me. Let's see how this goes. Again, I find Errol Spence's counter lawsuit to be a bit strange. Like, why would he be doing that when he's got money to live off for years? The last point about what was said in this article about how there was a text message between Errol Spence and someone called Al saying, hey, don't pay him more money. Was that Al Heyman that the article's referring to? Who knows? We won't know because we don't ever hear from Al Heyman. I mean, nobody hears from this guy. Let me know what you guys think down below about this situation. And yeah, is anybody else as surprised as I am that we keep seeing this? Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Later.